Hello and welcome back to the Doubles Take podcast. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and I'm so sorry about the hiatus for about a month. I was really busy with school and finals and some projects I was working on, so school is done now. Those are done. It's the summer. I'll have plenty of time. My hope is to get out an episode every single Friday, and I have a bunch of interviews, exciting ones lined up, and some cool episodes on the way. And today's episode is one I'm very excited for. I interviewed Eric Linden. He's a stunt performer and stunt coordinator who most recently was one of Jake Gyllenhaal's stunt doubles for the new Roadhouse movie. He also was a stunt coordinator on Renfield, Bones and All, and some other great projects. We talked about those. We talked about Renfield. We also talked about his time as the stunt double for Jon Bernthal on the Punisher series. Also in the second season, being the stunt coordinator. So we talked about a bunch of those and kind of his experience with lighting people on fire, being lit on fire himself. And there's a great Jon Bernthal story in here. It's a really fun episode. So if you're a fan of the Punisher, you're going to love it. We talk a bunch of Punisher and all those great fight scenes you remember. And I just want to say we talk a little bit about the new Roadhouse movie. So if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend watching it before or after this episode. But if you haven't, you're totally gonna have a great time. It's a really fun interview. So without further ado, here it is. So hi Eric, thank you so much for coming on to the Doubles Take today. I really appreciate you being on. I have a couple of questions I wanted to ask you. I'm just going to kind of get right into them. So I watched your stunt reel on IMDb, which is so cool, by the way. And I saw you've done a lot of flame and firework, and I haven't really had a lot of people on this show who have talked about that and done that kind of stunt work. So I'm so curious to see, how your process is with that and how much prep there is and how it kind of feels to be like fully lit on fire. Because it looks like even your head is on fire sometimes too, and I'm just wondering how kind of the process of that is.
Yeah, definitely have done a lot of fire over the years. It's been quite some time since I've actually been on fire because I've just become, one of the, industry experts in setting people on fire. And oftentimes I'd rather be the one in charge of setting someone on fire and keeping everybody safe just because of the
Mm-hmm.
amount of experience I've had doing it. Um, but like usually, there's you put on like fire gel on like multiple layers of clothing that go underneath like the clothes that you
Mm-hmm.
might be wearing.
Mm-hmm.
So the gel's pretty cold. It doesn't have to be cold, but it's just like this barrier between you and the fire. And because it is just like a gel, like water-based gel, it's cooler than your body temperature. So it
Mm-hmm.
just tends to like make you feel cold. And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes you can't wait to actually just be lit on fire so you would stop freezing, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but when you're on fire, you don't feel anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's you know the places that are exposed, like your hands and like your head, are really the main concern for danger in the because that's the most likely place that you could get burned. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you have fire gel all over your head, but that's the stuff that, like, if you're flailing around and you happen to brush across your cheek, well, that removes that gel, and it's an opportunity to get burned. And your body's got multiple layers of clothing on, so it's very protected, but you only have the layer of gel over your face. And when you're setting someone on fire, you're adding like a fuel on top of the clothes, and then you light the fuel on fire. Well, you don't put that onto your face, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not meant to go onto the gel, it's meant to go onto the clothing. But then the fire will
Mm-hmm.
come up around you, and your face is protected for a couple seconds at a time, but definitely not sustained fire like on those exposed areas. um,
Mm-hmm.
because then that's, that's how you get burnt. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's quite a process of putting everything together and making sure somebody's safe. But at the end of the day, it's still a stunt, and it can be dangerous. And sometimes people get a little burned here and there, but usually nothing too serious.
Okay. And I'm curious too, do you, when to get someone out, do you like extinguish them, or what's that process like of getting someone out like off fire?
Yeah, yeah. There's always fire extinguishers on set. CO2 fire extinguishers, and
Mm.
for anybody who's silly enough to try something like that on their own, the fire extinguisher is like under your kitchen cabinet. You do not want to use that. That is toxic, and if you breathe it,
Oh, okay.
yeah, if you breathe it, you're probably gonna die. Definitely not something to mess around with because there's a lot of factors that, the type of fuel to use and that type of stuff that some, you got these guys that pour gasoline on themselves and they're standing in a river. It's not a good idea. There's a lot of stuff that that we know that keep people safe, oddly enough, when they
Right.
are on fire. Yeah.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. Um, my next question is, so I saw that you were the double for Jake Gyllenhaal on Roadhouse, and I'm really curious how your experience was on that. And I was specifically how it was doubling for someone who I've read likes to do a lot of their own stunts. And also I watched some behind the scenes video, and it seems the fight scenes were done very differently in this film than previous ones. I think they're described as like A B C D shots. I think I don't remember where, but I'm just curious how your experience was with all that.
Yeah, I mean, it was awesome, and I'm always the first one to say that, I wasn't the only double.
Hmm.
There were, I mean, that dude had probably four different doubles,
Wow.
all doing different things, right? And
Hmm.
every one of them is an absolute savage. Like they're all very good at what
Hmm.
they do. I was the one that probably looked the closest to him, and I did a
Hmm.
lot of dieting. And I mean, I was nowhere near as shredded as that guy was, but like I cut down like 20 pounds so that I was as ripped as I could be. And I did a lot of a lot of the fight stuff. Sometimes you would do multiple passes where he's doing
Hmm.
he's doing a pass and then I might do a pass. And sometimes there were certain moves that were, one double was like really great at doing them, right? So that he would do that, and then I would do like some
Hmm.
of the wide shots, and like I get thrown over the bar, like tackled by Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
So it really takes a village, to make this happen, and I certainly can't take all the credit. But
Yeah.
Jake did, I mean, he did everything that was considered like not dangerous, right? I
Hmm.
mean, he did all his fighting and was very good at it and trained really hard for that. But there were things like Connor picks me up and tosses me over the bar.
Right. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're not gonna have Jake do that. Just like there's a chance that he could like bang his foot right as he goes over, and then like now he can't
Right.
walk the rest of the show. If I bang my foot and I can't walk, they just ship me home and get a new guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a couple spots in there like that where we had, he had a double for some of that stuff. But yeah, he
Hmm.
did a lot. Man, he did almost everything. So he's very capable actor, and
Hmm.
I think that that's great. Ultimately, it's you still do a ton of work. Like
Right.
I was always fighting Conor McGregor when he's learning the fights, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
couldn't always have time to get him and Jake together. So just
Hmm.
schedule wise. So when it was his time for training, Jake might be filming. So I'm the one
Hmm.
fighting him and blocking all the
Wow.
fights with him so that he can learn it, and then he steps in there with Jake. So like it doesn't mean I do a ton of work
I
necessarily
see.
on camera all the time, but there's so much work leading up to that where you're constantly doing stuff, and getting the other actor dialed in. And Connor's double would fight Jake, so or Jake would watch me as I would do some of the fights, and the fight
Hmm.
coordinators giving him tips, and then he steps in and fights
Right.
the Connor double until we get an
Hmm.
opportunity to get them both together.
Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting. And I feel like people don't know a lot of. There's a lot of prep that goes into it, right?
Yep.
And really quick, I want to ask you about something you said earlier. You know how you said you got into shape, into shape for doubling Jake. Is that something that they ask you when you're hired? Like, can you try to look as close to him as possible, or is that something that you kind of take into your own hands so you can double him as close as you can?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of both, but it was
Mm-hmm.
definitely, there's going to be some shirt off type of stuff, and they were trying to
Right.
find somebody that was really close, and I wasn't too far out as far as I was already in pretty good shape, and they're like,
Right.
can you cut down? And it was a conversation that went on for a couple of weeks, and
Okay.
I started cutting down immediately, after a week or so, like they check in, like, how you looking? And I'd like send them a picture with my shirt off and be like, yeah, like I'm getting dialed, right?
Yeah.
So that was definitely like, yeah, Jake's coming in super lean. Um, the main difference was, he had been training for this thing and getting bigger
For a long
and cutting
time.
down for a long time. I just
Right.
had to walk in as is. And
Yeah.
yeah, there was no opportunity to like get bigger. Like it was like, yeah, you got two weeks, and we're bringing you out here. So
Right.
I was cutting the entire show, and
Wow.
I was just basically doing it by like calorie deficit. It wasn't like I was doing
Hmm.
some insane cardio. Like I kept lifting to try to like, look as full as possible, but it was basically just like,
Right.
eating vegetables and meat, and that was about it. And
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah,
trying to
yeah.
lose as much weight as possible.
Right. That makes sense. And another question I have about Roadhouse is this is Conor McGregor's kind of first Hollywood movie doing fighting that's not trying to actually hurt the other person. So I'm so curious how that was prepping with him and training with him for someone who like their whole career has kind of been focused on actually hurting the other person, how it was like training with him.
Yeah. I mean, he was super cool. I wasn't really worried about it. I had a couple of people be like, "Oh my God, like what if he accidentally punches you or something?" I'm just like,
Hmm.
like that's happened anyway, just with like other stunt people and stuff like that. But I remember he was in the bar where he gets attacked by a bunch of people and is like boom, 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 and like
Yeah. Yeah,
knocking
yeah,
them
yeah.
off of him.
Yeah.
And someone was like, "Oh yeah, like I just want you, like I make sure I don't get hit." And Connor goes, "I'll never forget." He looks at me, he's like, "Hit you?" He's like, "Mate, I can punch the eyelashes off a butterfly." And you're like he's like, "I'm not gonna hit you." Like he's just saying, like I am that accurate. And
Right.
from my experience, that's exactly correct. Like
Hmm.
he can stop his fist on a dime. He was extremely accurate, and he had like an incredible memory because we would show him 20, 30 beats of a fight, and
Right.
he never had any problem remembering it. And I'm assuming a lot of it
Wow.
is from remembering like boxing combos, like one, two, three,
Right.
3, 2, 1, dot, dot, bum, 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 like on the hand pads.
Right.
But he would
Hmm.
remember just an immense amount of choreo, which usually that's what jams people up. Yeah, like the fight stuff for him wasn't hard. I think the main thing was he wasn't always great at feeling where the camera was. Like, you would
Mm.
tell him to sell it in one place, and
Hmm.
but if the camera was off, he was doing exactly what you said. If camera was over here just a little bit, it might not sell. There'd be a big gap or something like that. And
Right.
we wouldn't fix him. He was like, fix the camera. This dude's just doing exactly what he's told.
Yeah.
So yeah, he I think probably the acting stuff was probably way harder for him than any of the fight things.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. Well, thank you for talking to me about that. I watched it
Mhm.
a few weeks ago, and it was really it's a really fun time. I really liked it, and the stunts are wild, and the boat scene at the end, that was a really fun movie to watch. I bet it was fun to make too.
Yeah, yeah, it was a blast to make. I feel like I have so much love for the original, but happy with how this one turned out. It's definitely like a different movie, but yeah, it
A
was a good,
different,
it was a fun watch for sure.
right. And next, I wanted to ask you. I saw in your stunt reel that you were the one that was dumped on the table by Ryan Gosling and Russell Crowe and the Nice Guys, and I love that movie a lot. And I'm
Hmm.
just curious how that came together and how because that's kind of a visual gag and stunt, right? So I'm curious how
Hmm.
that is different from doing like something else that's kind of more intense, and this is something that's kind of played for comedic effect, and how that came together and how filming that was.
Yeah, it was actually like a really interesting story because I think the guy that they were the body that they were dumping, I can't quite remember, but he'd been like shot in the face or something like that, right?
Right. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so that the actor, well, they had a stunt guy that they hired as the actor. They got into a jam where they were filming and they needed him over on this other set and he wasn't going to be available for the second unit shot of
Hmm.
of they dumped the body, but then it's a separate shot where the body falls. Like he's unavailable, like he's on the other unit. So I got a
Yeah.
call and they were like, hey, can you come? But so I went to double a different another stunt guy. And
Wow.
yeah, because it's not me, it's only me when I fall, it's some other stunt guy the whole time, and he was brought
Uh-huh.
in as the stunt guy to do that fall. And
Yeah. Yeah.
he's unavailable, and they're like, hey, can you come in tonight? And I'm like, sure, dude, like what am I doing? They're like, high fall. And I was like, okay, cool. And then they there's a prosthetic across one of the sides of my face, so I can't
Right.
see out of one eye. And
Wow.
they basically had some sort of platform or something, like I think it was actually just a ladder. It was like ridiculous, like just like two ladders like this and then one going across like super high up, so you're like going
What? Yeah.
like climbing out on this thing. I'm just kind of like looking down, like trying to like line it up, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I guess it looks good to me. And I was just like kind of on all fours and just roll off, right? And
Right.
land on the table. I think that the challenging part was that you're dead. So if it hurt, if it hurt, like you just have to like be like, I remember I like hit and I was like, like don't move, right? Like you're dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's how that went.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah. That is crazy, and it's such a funny movie, and that scene's really funny too. And is it different because I think in the scene when you fall, there's like a lot of people standing around the table. Does that kind of affect how it's planned too? Because it's not just like you're dropping and nobody's there. Like they're supposed to be having some sort of dinner there, right? So there was like 6 or 8 people there. It looked like.
Yeah, yeah. Those are all stunt people. Every single one of them had to be a
Wow.
stunt person just in case like I hit them or the table smashed and something got on them, or like
Right.
and so that their timing would be like get away from the table and all that stuff. So yeah, there was like 8 stunt people all sitting around there.
Wow. Wow. Next, I'd like to talk to you about your stunt coordinating work on Renfield. That movie, it has such kind of crazy fight scenes, and people are like, I remember when I saw like Renfield sends them flying, and I'm so curious how it was coordinating that. And I really liked that scene with Renfield in the apartment, kind of the atrium area. That's
Hmm.
such a crazy scene. I'm so curious how that came together. Maybe other fights in the movie, how it was coordinating that.
Yeah, did you see that it was me at the end that gets his head smashed?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so like,
Wow.
I was one of the coordinators on it. My
Hmm.
my good buddy Chris Brewster, who actually used to be Daredevil, and him and
Wow.
I have fought each other like 100 times. He was the main coordinator, and I was like an additional coordinator. So he
Okay.
was directing second unit. So he was actually directing the apartment fight and I was coordinating it, right? Like, but it was really
Okay.
like a team effort.
Okay.
Um, but it's like technically it was like he was the main guy. But yeah, it was that was one of those things where some of those bigger fights, like we were able to go to that apartment complex and that was completely shut down in New Orleans because of like weather damage or something like that. And we were able to previs the entire thing in the
Wow.
actual location. So we worked for probably like a week, shooting it and prevising it so that we
Hmm.
knew exactly what to do, where the wires were going, like how we were going to pull everything off, like where the flow was going to go,
Yeah.
and then yeah, shoot it on the day, and it works just like it did during the previs. So there's no surprises, and hopefully the idea is to be much more efficient when you're shooting it with the crew, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, I really liked I remember when I was watching it, they felt so unique, the fight scenes and kind of crazy with Dracula sending them flying, and I really enjoyed those. And
Yeah, that was
so
a
that
super
scene was
fun,
cool.
really fun movie to work on. Yeah,
Yeah.
the director Chris McKay, he's awesome, and
Hmm.
he really leaned on Chris Brewster and the whole stunt team to make it unique and fun,
Yeah.
because although it was almost like a lower budget movie, we had enough to make those fights like as cool as possible. And
Right.
actually there was the well, I lit that guy on fire, Dracula,
Wow.
for that scene, and I just
Yeah.
found out we got nominated for a tourist stunt award for that fire. So,
Wow.
which
Congratulations.
that's pretty cool. Yeah, like I don't know if
Yeah.
we'll win or not, but like yeah, it was we went huge with that one. It was
Yeah.
yeah, big.
I remember that. That was wild. Yeah. That was crazy. So congratulations. That's super cool.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you're the second stunt double I've interviewed for Jon Bernthal. A few weeks ago, I interviewed Jordan Scott, who I'm sure you know. Right, I interviewed him a
Hmm.
few weeks ago and spoke to him a little bit, and he kind of talked about how awesome Jon Bernthal was and how the Punisher
Hmm.
is. And so I have a few questions here, and I have a lot of friends that love The Punisher, and a lot of fans of this podcast are, and they'd be very mad at me if I didn't ask you about one of the famous fight scenes today, the gym fight scene, and how
Hmm.
that came together. Because that's such a crazy fight scene. I love it. It's done so well, and like with the plates, it's really brutal. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah, I love that one. Actually, in season two of
Mhm.
Punisher, I ended up taking over as the stunt coordinator for that
Right.
season.
Hmm.
And I had another guy double John because I couldn't do both,
Do
right?
both. Right.
But yeah, me and one of my buddies who's a fight coordinator, we came up with the gym fight. It's weird because the script always says like sometimes there's a little bit of detail when it comes to the fight, but basically it was
Hmm.
like he goes into the gym and he's surrounded by eight Russians or whatever, and they fight. Like that's kind of like what it said essentially.
Hmm.
Um, so we go in with like a really like open slate, like the
Hmm.
main thing was like, okay, what does the place look like? And they took us to the gym where it was all going to happen, and so
Hmm.
we were able to kind of build it around the where things were. And yeah, I just knew that I wanted to kind of like use the environment around him, and nothing seems more painful than just somebody like getting a weight right into their knee or
Yeah.
whatever. And
Right.
worked on the sequel to 300, and I'm like, oh dude, he needs to like pick up this plate like it's like a Captain America shield and like block it. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to just like kind of come up with that. And almost like anytime you get like a bathroom fight, it's like there's so many bathroom fights, so you're always like
There is.
challenged
Yeah.
to try to make something that doesn't look like James Bond or doesn't look like that. So like I mean we had
Right.
a bathroom fight, the knife fight in that season too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was like, yeah, we got to use all of our creative juices to try and make this like unique and not like something everybody's already seen before.
Right. Right. And I'm curious. So how do you kind of how does it how do you kind of choreograph it? I'm curious how it comes together. Do you pre-visit or do you just like go on like a mat and like a training
Uh,
area and kind of just
Oh yeah, we prevised everything
mm,
in Punisher, because there's a standard set like on Daredevil season one.
mm,
Phil Severa did a great job coming up with all these fights that are still like people are still watching the hallway fight from season one of Daredevil.
yeah.
And the best way to accomplish some of the best fight stuff that you see is that the stunt people go and pre-visit ahead of time,
Right.
because like everybody can throw like a hook, right? Well, that hook's only going to look like brutal or painful or like super cool depending on the camera and what the
Right.
camera's doing. So that's when prevising becomes really important, and kind of how it will be edited together, or at least super close to it by figuring this out ahead of time.
Right.
The fights that they just like kind of come up with what the moves are going to be, and nobody knows how to shoot it. Well, they usually end up not so great. Like
Hmm.
the crew's fine and they can accomplish shooting it, but you're going to get the best stuff like John Wick or like the Daredevil stuff if you pre-visit. So
Right.
sometimes you get an opportunity like the gym and the apartment. We were able to go to the actual location, and
Mm.
production rents it for the day for us, and we go in there with like some sort of rough plan that we've come up within our like studio gym, and then we kind of build it out from there, and then film it.
Yeah.
But the process usually goes when we see what the like the bathroom fight, we got the dimensions for what the bathroom were, and then we
Oh, okay.
yeah, yeah. So then we go into our like stunt gym at the studio, and we tape it on the ground, and so we know
Okay.
like how big the stalls are, where the sinks are, where's the door,
Hmm.
and like all like how much room you have to travel around, and then we build the fight like that with just like kind of tape on the ground, and that's how we figured that part of it out, and then when we're
Yeah, yeah.
ready to shoot it, sometimes we get to go to the location, and that's what we'll really figure out like how the camera moves around and like in this space.
Okay. Okay. That's so fascinating to hear. That's so cool. And yeah, Punisher is awesome, and I'm sure it was really cool working with Jon Bernthal, right? And it seems like he's a really physical guy and really likes getting in there and doing his fights, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I actually just did Daredevil. I was in New York when you first hit me up, and I was doing
Yeah.
the new season of Daredevil, and was
Wow.
yeah, yeah, I got to double him again, and
Cool.
work with John, and yeah, he did. We got two like really brutal fights, and he
Hmm.
does like everything. Like he did like like I'm there to block it and pre-visit and everything. I had to do like two little things, but he literally does it all. Like he's
Wow.
very good athlete, and yeah, he's a fast study, kind of like Connor, where he can just remember like an insane amount of moves. Like once you kind of like build him up, like he can remember everything. Some of these actors, their memories are incredible, like better than stunt people oftentimes.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, that's I listened to him tell a story. I think it was on Jimmy Kimmel about fighting with like the fractured
Yeah,
hand.
yeah. This
Right?
guy, yeah, he took he literally did the exact opposite of what I said to do, and I yeah, he had to break a bottle on someone's head, and I'm like,
Right.
make sure that you swing it like down, right, like this, and smash the bottle on his head. Well, this guy just goes boom and smashes his hand right into the guy's head, and the bottle explodes and everything. Well, he breaks his thumb because he hit him like this,
Oh.
and I was like, he's like, I fucked up my hand. And then we go, like we forced him to go get an X-ray, and damn thing's broken. You were like, I'm like, dude, like it's like the second week of filming. Yeah. And he's like, oh man, I don't know how that. And we like watch playback. I'm like, you didn't do it. You did exactly the opposite of what I said to do, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was then they had to write it into the show. That's what was so funny is they ended up
Hmm.
writing the broken hand into the show, and
Hmm.
then we went back in time to film the stuff before he had broken his hand or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so like they could keep filming with his cast on. It was crazy.
That is crazy. It's crazy how you have to improvise when stuff like that happens, right? And
Mhm.
especially with probably why a lot of actors don't do their own stunts because if something happens like that, you have to kind of improvise and change it around that, right? When your main actor
Yeah,
gets
yeah, yeah,
injured
yeah.
or
I
something.
mean, yeah, that was something that was very, that you would always have an actor do that thing. It wasn't anything dangerous. He
Oh,
just he
okay.
just he just found a way to like fuck himself up. It was absurd.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, yeah, that's it can really put a damper on production. That's why, like, if it is something dangerous, like, oh, jump out of this 10 feet to the ground, which is not like that big of a deal, but you just don't want to risk them
Right.
doing it and like
Right.
twisting an ankle or otherwise.
Hmm. And so, like you said, you coordinated the Punisher. And do you like that kind of more? than doubling? Do you have a preference, or is it just anything that's involved in the stunt work you like?
I think just like the coordinating aspect of it, I do really enjoy it because
Mm-hmm.
you're the boss and you have like
Right.
some sort of creative input.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I like that part of it, but I still love performing, you know.
Right.
Like Roadhouse, it was like I was just there to double, right? Like I didn't
Mm-hmm.
get to pick any of the moves or decide what happens. It was somebody else's job to do that, and I just tried to go in and execute it to the best of my ability. So I love performing also, but yeah, both are great.
Yeah, yeah. Now, something I ask every stunt performer who comes on the show is how you feel about there being no stunt category at the Oscars. Is that something that you have kind of strong opinions about and that you hear talked about a lot too?
Yeah, I mean, some people are more stuck on it than others. I mean, I think that there certainly should be a category. I mean, like if you can win an Oscar for slapping a wig on somebody's head, I feel like we should certainly get them. It's kind of absurd that we don't, but
Right.
I'm not going to be like waving a flag or petitioning to make it happen because like I think most stunt people will tell you that like we don't do this for trophies.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't do it for trophies. So I don't really give
Yeah.
a fuck. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense, right? Because you're not doing it like for the spotlight. You know what I mean? So yeah,
Nah,
I get that.
yeah, it's not gonna make me feel like I did a better job just because I got like a fucking trophy for it. Like it
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
but that being said, like some of these people, they really should be recognized for innovation. Like I don't know that you need to have like some sort of category that's like best fight scene and best this and best that. But I think that there should be like an Oscar, some of these stunt people that are doing revolutionary work. They're still
Mm-hmm.
like the fight stuff that we did that was different in Roadhouse, right? Like that was like something that really hadn't been done like that. So it could
Right.
be an Oscar for innovation. The guy on Fall Guy, the new Fall Guy movie, he just broke the record for the amount of times a car flipped.
Well,
I
yeah, I
mean,
saw that. Wow. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's like really like, you're only going to give, it should just be like outstanding stunt performance and then maybe one for, or even just recognize the coordinators, right? Like, should just be
Right.
like
Right.
best stunt coordination and all of the industry, which is like Mission Impossible would have won it like 10 times in a row. I think that would be a good one. And then it should be like innovation. I think would be really cool for there's people that have come up with some of these things to make things safer. For example, like
Mm-hmm.
innovation in airbags or like descenders or whatever it might be to keep all these actors and otherwise safe people safe.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty cool stuff, and people are still innovating to this day. So like I think an
Right.
innovation category would be good. So you can hand out like two trophies and that's that. I don't think it needs to be like best stunt double, best stunt by a woman, best stunt by like it would just be insane, and I don't think they want to open that can of worms, honestly.
Right. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And thank you for talking to me about that. I appreciate it.
Mhm.
Just lastly here, is there any fun, cool kind of stunt stories you like to share or some that you always kind of talk about over the years?
Oh geez, I mean, I guess it's all just depends on what somebody wants to know. It's so funny because like it's almost like I've done so much that I can't
Right.
can't quite remember something. It was like, oh yeah, this was the best thing ever. Um, I,
Yeah.
I think the one thing that's always interesting is it's in my reel where I do this like huge pipe ramp where the car like flips like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of times you get like a ton of money for doing that, and it's pretty dangerous. Well, I'd never had the opportunity to flip a car before, and
Mm-hmm.
I was coordinating a video game high school,
Right.
and they wanted to do this, and they didn't have the money to like pay somebody to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I want to do it. and they're like, yeah, but like how much is it going to cost? And like we figured out how much the cage for the car and like what type of work was going to need to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, look, I'll just do it for free. Like, like
Wow. Yeah.
yeah. So I was like, I just want you guys to pay for like the proper personnel that I need to have around
Mm-hmm.
to make sure I'm safe and all that stuff. But yeah, I did what would somebody that got like $10,000 for or something, like
Wow.
for nothing. Yeah,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
but it'll be on my reel till the day I die. So I
Right.
guess it was worth it.
Yeah, I saw it. It was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the show today. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to speak to me. And I loved hearing what you had to say, and thank you for coming on.
Yeah, right on. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Of course.